Good afternoon. Welcome back to Home Sweet Loan. We are here with Charlie Peterson, and we are so excited to have you join us today. Thank
I'm
you.
excited to be here. Thank you. Okay, and real quick before we get on to the rest of the video, go ahead and check out our YouTube channels. Mine is Beyond the Move Orlando. We're going to go through local cities, buyer mistakes, where I've got some fun home tours on there as well. But you've got a lot of key information. We're going to dive into specific topics as a homeowner. And then also, Kristen has a channel called Next Mortgage, the EC team, your home girl. Go ahead and follow her there. She's always giving great advice on home buying tips, financing tips. And so if you follow those two channels, you'll have everything you need to know. All right, now let's get back to it.
Want to learn a little bit about you, share with everybody a little bit about your background. And you're with Keller Williams. You've been with Keller Williams for how long?
I've been with KW for 6.5 years. So I started with KW right out of college. I studied real estate and finance in college, and then I jumped into the real estate industry, and I've been loving it ever since.
Well, and you're having a lot of success, and that being even in a tougher market that we're in, it looks like it continued to increase volume and help more buyers and work with more sellers, which is awesome. So congratulations on all the success you're having. Tell us about what's your favorite thing about the industry?
It's the people. I know it's going to sound very cheesy, but realistically, you get to see people go through so many different aspects of the homeownership journey, and I get to be a part of all of that. And usually, it's one of the largest transactions that they'll be involved in. So there's problems to be solved in every transaction, and to help guide people through that, it's been really exciting. Whether it's
Yeah.
downsizing, first-time home buyers, other situations that are a little bit more complex. It really is. It's just fun to help see the people go through all of that. Yeah.
Yeah, and to be honest, it seems like it doesn't matter whether it's their first house or their sixth house. It seems like, it's always a stressful transaction. Like it's just any type of change like that can be stressful. So,
Well,
um,
yeah, they say that some of the most stressful things you can do in life are buying or selling a house, renovating a house. Obviously, there's death, divorce, and a lot of times too, some of those all come at the same time. You buy a house and you renovate it, or you renovate it and then they sell it, or maybe you inherited a house and you're dealing with the grief of that and you need to sell property, or you're buying because you received an inheritance. And a lot of times, no matter what, it's stressful because there's multiple of those factors at the same time.
yeah, absolutely. Well, and the fact that we get to be a part of that and guide people, on your side and my side, of course, the financial side can be extremely stressful and nerve wracking, especially with first time home buyers. But, even the seasoned buyer, when they're going through the process, like, am I going to qualify? Is there going to be something they find? Or, even if you've got all your ducks in a row, sometimes it's just scary. So having a good team in place, in my opinion, is obviously the first place that we want to start. So,
Definitely. Yeah.
so what we really want to focus on today is affordability for home buyers. That's really been the biggest challenge, I think, in the last several years, with interest rates being higher and taxes and insurance just being a little crazy sometimes. And so the affordability tends to be really a big hot button for home buyers. So I wanted to talk with you about that and talk about what you feel like a smooth, stress-free transaction looks like from start to finish. I mean, the idea is to maybe set up people so they can alleviate some of that stress. And sometimes that's starting in the right place with the right team and the right education. So what are your thoughts on that?
Well, affordability is, you can think of it in a few different ways. There's the ratios, debt to income ratio, and then there's the overall purchase price too. But also another layer on top of that is, what lifestyle do you want? Do you want the home to own your lifestyle, or do you want your lifestyle to choose the house that you want? And right now, when things are pinched really tight, with affordability, with income versus mortgage payments right now, it can be tough to help make that decision. But getting your mindset around, okay, do I want to be able to save for retirement? Do I want to be able to take vacations? Do I want how much time do I want to spend in a car driving to and from the house? Can help dictate so much of the affordability, more than just what interest rates are. And
Yeah.
so there's ways we can get around high interest rates. There are ways that we can go about that. such as home seller concessions. We can work those into deals. We can think about new construction if you want to be somewhere for long term. We can think about that. We can think about assuming a loan and then taking on a secondary mortgage with Kristen's team too. So there's different ways we can get the foot in the door at a more affordable rate. But really, the mindset of let's figure out what our lifestyle wants to be, and then from there, let that choose the house we get.
Yeah, and so often I have people come to me, they want to buy a home. We start with what's the price point we think. Let's talk through that, or they apply
Yep.
and they throw a price point in there. And it's not, like you said, it's not just about, okay, what's the max I can take them to? And this is what you should go look for a house.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk about what you want your monthly payment to look like. And like you said, sometimes the rate necessarily doesn't matter. If we can get you to the payment that you're comfortable with, then that solves for lifestyle and all those things. You always hear people say, like, I don't want to be house poor, right? And so house poor in some cases means we're taking you to the very tippy top. We're barely getting in the door. We're barely squeaking through underwriting because we're so tight on how much we're qualifying you for. And long term, that could obviously create stress in the future down the road, because taxes and insurance can change. Once you've moved the home into your name, taxes can adjust, or insurance can go up. And so when you go to the very tippy top, you just don't have room for that.
Yeah. And from my experience, taxes and insurance can be one of the most overlooked aspects when buying a house, and can really swing the affordability of a particular property.
Yes.
If you've got an older home that maybe it has new roof, new HVAC, but it's an older home, your insurance can be way more. If you find a property that it's in the city zoning versus county zoning, your taxes can swing majorly too. So there's some of those key details there we need to pay attention to. And then taxes change. So what you see online is not exactly what the tax bill is actually going to be. So we can custom tailor what a tax estimate would be through a lot of the property appraiser sites. They have a free tool for it. And we can look at what it would be customized to the individual rather than what the previous owner's was.
Yeah. And you mentioned new construction. That's sometimes, I think, where people in those situations get caught too, because when new construction is assessed with the taxes at the very beginning, we're just looking at what they are for the land. And we don't have a way to, we have an estimator, but it's truly an estimator. And if the lender hasn't done due diligence on what the taxes could go to, you could be in true payment shock. I mean, I've seen people come with horror stories.
Yeah. I've sat with too many people on the resale side of it, just having painful conversations of their mortgage payment going up $1,200 more than they thought it was going to be. And so don't go to a new build without representation. Don't go to, they will, either you will forget about it or they just won't mention it. And so just be very wary of that. But yeah, I've sat with people who thought the taxes were $300 a year because that's what the dirt was taxed at. And then they assess it for the property and it's $4,500 per year. And then they have to make up last year and pay this year's. And now it's $1,200 more per month on taxes alone. And that a lot of people
can really crush somebody. 100%. That's very tough. And so that, again, we kind of go back to having that right. It's super important to make sure you've got the right representation on your side, and making sure that you're covering all those things, because not everybody might cover those things, and making sure that they're set up for success, because it's not about just closing today. It's what does the next 30, well, maybe not staying in the house 30 years, but what does the next 30 years look like? What does the next 10 years look like? 2 years?
Yeah, definitely. And then the other thing too, mindset wise, when you look at affordability on a house, it's really easy for us, especially those who are analytical thinkers, to say, well, they bought that house for $250,000 4 years ago, and now it's $450,000. What in the world? Let's give them a $350,000 offer because they're going to make $100,000 from what they paid for it. It's just not how it works. And then on the flip side of it too, if you're trying to time the market, there's no 10-year period of time in which markets haven't recovered if it crashes. So if you look back from 2008 to 2018, a huge majority of properties came back in value from when they dropped. There's one-off situations, maybe a golf course closed, properties didn't come back in value. But if you're really looking for a deal and you feel like the market's too high right now, if you're planning on being there for 10 plus years, just forget about the what the market is right now. It only matters when you go to sell.
Yeah, that's all very good information. I think there's so much focus on a couple things right now: the market crashing, which we know that that's not happening, and then interest rates.
Mm-hmm.
But the reality is that prices values will continue to increase slowly. We're not going to see COVID years again. That was like an anomaly, and that's not the norm, right? But if you owned a house during that time, it was great. But
yeah, a lot of wealth was built during that time. A
yeah.
lot of wealth. And when I say wealth, I mean a lot of equity inside of a house. A lot of equity was built because the market appreciated so fast during that time.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I've got a couple of customers that hesitated because they thought the market was going to pop. And I've got 3 or 4 customers that just never bought, and they missed out on like 250 grand in equity.
Yeah.
So just got to be precarious of that. And it's funny too. I know I'm going to speak for another minute, but the median price point in Volusia County and Seminole County hasn't really dropped at all. And you think of all the extra inventory that's been added, you think about the higher interest rate, median price points haven't dropped. In Volusia County, where you've got nearly 6 or 7 months worth of inventory, if not more, in hyperlocal markets, the median price hasn't dropped. And I think a lot of that's due to inflation. So if there was a time for prices to really come down in value, it has been over the last year and a half, and it hasn't happened.
It hasn't happened. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Values have held strong. I mean, we're seeing, and you can speak to this too, but we're seeing listings sitting a little bit longer. So in your mind, what does that mean?
Listings sitting a little bit longer. There's a few different factors in that. You can look at condition of the home. You can look at also what's the inventory around the area. And where I think the worst market, if you were to talk about a bad market right now, where there's a lot of doom and gloom if you're on social media and watching YouTube videos, there's a lot of doom and gloom out there. And I think there could be some truth to it if you did one of 2 things. You bought around a ton of new construction.
Yeah.
So when you think of the supply and demand focus, if you were to get a local market and you were to flood 3,000 new homes into that hyper local 2-mile radius, your supply way outpaced the demand. And so if you bought directly from a new builder over the last 2 years, you're probably underwater. But again, that doesn't matter unless you go to sell or you can't afford the house. It doesn't matter.
So if you need to sell, what do those people do? What are you recommending for those clients that are in the new construction areas that need to sell? How are you handling those?
So if you're in the new construction areas, there's really only one thing that you can do. Is you can really look at what the builder is doing to incentivize people to buy their houses. Because the builder is still getting premium prices. However, the builder is only getting premium prices for 2 things. They're buying down interest rates, and they're paying for closing costs, prepaids, or given a whole bunch of incentives. And if you were an investor, like most large builders are, it's a group of investors that provide a product, they are getting those prices because they're offering the incentives. And they're only offering the incentives because they need to get the prices. If they didn't offer those incentives, they would not be getting the prices. An investor just wouldn't give out free, prepaid down interest rates or closing costs unless they knew that they had to.
And the builder makes, has so many different ways to make money in the transaction. So they've got the room to do it, right? So
they own the financing company, they own the title company, they own the developer. There's so many different things. They own the insurance company that they sell, the insurance for right away. So there's a lot of money for them to make in that, and they can control that a lot. But if you're a homeowner that's competing against the builder, unless you are either significantly lower in price point than the builder, or you are going to offer incentives that match what the builder can do, it's the only way you can sell it.
Yeah.
The only way to compete.
Okay. Yeah. And then you were going to say something else, and I think I cut you off, but I wanted to kind of just weigh on what the builder, what you do in that situation, because there really is a lot of that.
There is. I've dealt a lot in a neighborhood where I've competed against a builder a lot. And really the only times that I've had success actually moving a property is to offer concessions, make sure that we have some kind of upgrade that the builder doesn't. So offering those concessions, or we just go in in more motivated cases where a seller just wants to put a really low price in there, maybe 30 or 40,000 less than what the builder's offering, that's another way to move it. And they can do that because they bought, very early on in those new build communities.
Right, right.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely not just throwing those houses on the market. There's a lot of strategy to those situations for sure. So again, working with somebody who's seasoned that knows how to handle it. So in your
Yeah.
perspective, what do you see most buyers struggling with right now, and how can an agent help them?
What I see most buyers struggling with right now, and this is going to be different than I think you might be expecting. I see buyers feeling the need to own a house right this second and not be ready to buy.
Okay.
And so
Yep.
they rush themselves into a home that, yes, they could afford on paper, but they're, like you said earlier, house poor. And so they rush themselves into a situation, but you don't have to buy a house until you're really ready. And when you're really ready, you can comfortably afford the payment. You've got a down payment to make. And then you've got a place where you know that you're going to live there for at least 5 years. Right now, I think that is a great place to start. You can comfortably afford the payment. You know where you want to be, and you know that you're going to be there for 5+ years.
Yeah, budgeting obviously is a big piece of it, and I think it's a big piece that's lacking. Again, I think that what happens is, and we'll go into like what a good transaction looks like, but I think a lot of times what happens is they do rush into it. They don't fully have all of the details. So like they may not have really reviewed numbers and true payment. And then they get into it and they qualified, but then they're just so far down the path of purchasing that they end up purchasing. And then, they're stuck with this payment that they didn't really think about what's the extra expenses that come with owning a home, the maintenance, the things that could happen. And those are all things that, renters don't necessarily have to think about. So it's important to build yourself a buffer into where you qualify.
Yep, definitely. Yeah, the other thing, so now when buyers are ready and able to purchase and they're confident in what they're doing, the next biggest thing that I think I've seen my buyers struggle with is, now that there's more options on the market, is committing to one. Is the market going down? Is there another house that's going to be better pop up on the market? There's more homes to choose from, so now we have hesitation. Whereas a few years ago, they just bought whatever popped up because it was
available. Yeah, that fit. Yeah.
So
what's your advice to that buyer when you've seen, some homes and you feel like we found the right one, and they're kind of giving you that feeling or that vibe? How do you handle that?
Yep. And usually it's kind of hard to put here's exactly what I'm looking for, but you just know when you're showing the right house. You just know that their eyes light up a little bit more. They get excited about it. But then they think, but what if there's another house down the street that's going to go active? I tell them, look, we've got 95% of everything you look for here, and I think this is the one. Would you regret if you missed out on this one and absolutely nothing else popped up that was close to it? And really that question of would you regret has helped solidify their own confidence, and then it's helped me know that, hey, this actually is the one.
This is or isn't. Yeah.
Yep, exactly. So if you can put yourself into the position of, hey, 3 or 4 weeks down the road, you missed out on that one because you waited to see if something else possibly better was going to come to the market, would you regret it? And usually it's an absolute yes or and maybe we could go to the next one. And then okay, it's not the right one. Let's keep going.
And that's okay. That's really okay. It's a very thought-provoking question that really kind of, helps kind of into their emotions a little bit to help them think about it.
Yeah. Yep. I asked that question yesterday to a set of buyers who were, we've got a seller who's very slow to respond to us. An investor seller is not in any rush. And, they're eager, and they're like, now they start to get to the point where they're offended that they haven't gotten their offer accepted yet. But this investor is taking a sweet time because he's in no rush. And so now they're like, well, let's just move on and really show them what's going on. And I'm like, well, would you regret if you didn't wait another 24 hours to get this property? And they're like, yes, we would. So, the question of would you regret it will help you figure out, is this right? Do we be a little bit more patient, or hey, we're confident enough to move on, we'll be all right.
Yeah. Okay. And so, what do you feel like a good transaction looks like? Where are we starting? Where does all of it start to make sure that we're setting ourselves up for smooth? And I mean, obviously things can happen, and
Mhm.
there's nothing that's going to be ever perfect, but where would be the best place to start if I was a buyer looking to get into the home buying process?
The first step, and it can come in one of two orders, but you have to talk to a good local agent, and you've got to talk to a great local lender. So you've got to contact Kristen, you've got to contact somebody like myself,
Yourself?
and
Yep.
you've got to get the plan in place for what does the process of buying a house look like. So one, talking to Kristen, even if it's not a hard credit pull up front, it's just, hey, what does the buying process look like on the financing side? And start to build your education level on getting confident with the process. And that can start 6 months out from when you're ready to buy. It can start, a year out if you're really early on, but it definitely has to start before you're ready to go start looking at houses. I think when we start looking at houses, we're shopping without a budget, and you can either afford more than you think, or you can afford less than you think, and either way, it's not good.
Well, and potentially isn't going to end well. So I spoke to a buyer yesterday, and he said, "I don't know why I have to do this before I want to see houses." And I
Yeah.
said, and I said, well, it's super important for us to know that you're comfortable with the payment, that the houses that you're looking at, you're comfortable with the payment, and that we can actually close on the house that you're interested in. I mean, we don't want you to go in, fall in love, come to find out that this price point is not even where we need to be to close a loan. And so it's really setting them up for failure if we don't do it the right way.
Well, and it's just so sad to see a vision of what they think they could get and it not be realized
Oh,
because they can afford that much, because nothing else they look at is going to be good enough anymore. And that's just it's so sad to see. I don't
yeah.
like that. But definitely start with talking to a lender. Start with a game plan. Get to know the process of what is escrow, what is homeowners insurance, what is property tax, how does that all operate in the scheme of buying a house and then maintaining the house after you buy it. And then from there, then we're ready to go shopping.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
go house hunting.
I think
So
that helps with the realistic expectations. I think it helps with education. A lot of times we get buyers coming in thinking that they can't do something because they need 20% down, or that,
yeah.
Whatever the case is, there are so many different programs out there to help people that people
Mhm.
just aren't aware of. We are actually starting a monthly education series for buyers just to educate them. So it's like online in the evening once a month, and we're going to cover every piece of the home buying process from start to finish, just to educate, because I just think that there is, if you can have the education going into the process, you'll have the right expectations and you'll have a much better experience.
Exactly. And I hate to compare it to such an elementary level thing, but when you got your first permit, you started to drive, it was a scary process. Maybe you were confident enough, and then you realized, oh wait, no, this is a little bit harder than I thought because I don't know everything that's going on. I don't know all the road signs, or I don't know my directions and where I'm going. But you were still kind of bumping your way through and figuring it out. And then, once you've been driving for a little while, after you're educated on everything, you're very used to it. Now it's easy. Now this is something you are very confident in. You know exactly what your destination is, and that's what talking to a lender does first for you. Is it gets you to a position of, I have a game plan, and now I just have to execute it. There's no
Yeah.
questions about what is this that I'm going to do next.
So we've got them pre-approved, we got them ready to go. What's gonna be our next step to keep things peaceful? Because that's obviously what we're talking about here.
So once we're pre-approved, then at that point in time, I have a sit down. Usually I'd take them coffee, or we're going to come to the office, and we're going to sit down for about 45 minutes to an hour, really diving into what is the dream home, what is the ideal home, because then we can filter out everything that we see online with a fine-tooth comb, and we can take 40 properties and now turn it down into 6. And then we can take those 6 properties and say, okay, now what is, we can start to rank those, and we're not going to go see 40 houses, because once you start to see more than 6, really the brain is funny. It starts to create this perfect house that doesn't exist.
Right.
So, so we figure out exactly what you're looking for. We pick a handful of properties, and then we start to see those. And we're not going to go look at anything that doesn't meet the criteria of what we decided in that meeting.
So there's a lot of times I hear, well, I'm just going to look online. All the houses are online. I'll just look. I don't necessarily need an agent to find and look at houses until I'm ready to see houses. What's your response to that? Because I disagree, but I'm interested to hear what your response would be.
It's the question of how familiar are you with this entire purchase process? Could you go teach a class on this? If there's any bit of hesitation, you're not ready to just go look at properties online. We can help you out with a fine-tooth comb. You can look at properties for entertainment, but it's not more than that.
That's not where we're going to pick it. Yeah, we're not going to finalize it online. Sure. So
exactly.
What are some signs of a peaceful transaction to you? What if you were to think of the most perfect transaction you've ever had? What are some things that stand out that may have happened or may not have happened to make it peaceful or stressful?
So one of the things I do, and this is every perfect transaction that I've had, where it's just things are flawless, very smooth. Again, not 100% stress-free, because moving is stressful, but just they went very, very smooth. And it is having realistic expectation conversations before we go under contract. And part of that is included in inspections. Inspections are some of the most contentious points of a contract of, oh my goodness, is this a big deal or is that a big deal? We have that expectation conversation ahead of time, where we're probably going to find X, Y, and Z in any property that we go look at.
Even new construction.
Even new construction. So sometimes I will, I've got some redacted inspection reports, and I'll show a customer what those look like ahead of time. Part of the expectations conversation of, you're probably going to get a report that's going to look somewhat similar to this, but this is almost any home. So that's just one aspect of it. And then I have a blueprint that I share with them of, here's kind of the key milestones that we're looking for in the transaction. And we're going to keep you up to date on every single one of them. But just so you can familiarize yourself with it, here you go. This is what to expect.
I love that.
Yeah, and nothing usually pops up as a surprise whenever that happens. They know that, hey, yeah, we've got 2 weeks before that's due, so we're not going to pester you every single day on it, or we're not going to freak out of where is that item, because we know it's due in 2 weeks. So.
Yeah, one thing I would add to the front end process too is, before getting under contract, we've got to make sure they understand their cash to close. So I work with a lot of veterans that I get. Maybe because I'm a second opinion, they've been pre-approved somewhere else and they're coming to me to get a second opinion or rate quote or whatever. And when we start to dive into the cash to close, they're like, oh no, I don't have any cash to close because I have a VA loan. And yes, that's correct. You don't have any cash to close. You don't have any down payment cash to close, but they're closing costs. So for me, a red flag is absolutely when the lender hasn't gone over that, because that is something that should be very clearly articulated along with the payment before we're getting under contract. So that would be for me a red flag. But what are some other red flags that you can think of when it comes to what's led to maybe stressful things?
Big red flags are, trust us, we can afford the property. That is
approved.
Yes. Because one that tells me a couple different things is, or trust us, we don't need to do that. We can afford the property. That is usually the biggest red flag that pops up, because it usually means a buyer is not mentally ready to give up some kind of control over the process. They're not willing to be helped along the process. So that can make things a little bit more stressful. You're dealing with a very direct person, and that's okay. But if they're not willing to go through the practical steps of creating a budget and affordability for it, they are not ready to share their full, honest thoughts on a particular home. That's a big red flag for me. Another red flag for me is we're very comfortable with buying the house. We've done this. 15 years ago. And it's like, okay, wait a second. Yeah, things have changed a lot. So
Yeah.
that's another red flag. Oh my goodness. I don't have a lot of red flags usually, other than that, because once I go into the expectation conversations, my red flags usually are taken away. So
Yeah.
I
Well,
don't.
you're very thorough. So obviously, if you're very thorough, you've kind of uncovered all that stuff. Unless
Yep.
they're unwilling to move through the transaction like in a normal fashion, which is getting your financing in place. And if they're cash, fantastic. But those things are going to kind of stop you in your tracks. Like, okay, wait a minute, why are we not wanting to have that conversation? That's a big part of the process and that kind of stuff. So yeah, I think that all these things are important. Communication is obviously super important too. We try to do on our side the best we can and have and over communicate with the things that we're going to need, and
Mm-hmm.
let's make sure we don't go open new debt and all those things. But at the end of the day, some of those things still don't end up happening. And so when those things, I mean, I had one recently where I said, okay, don't deposit any of the cash you have. And then we get under contract and there was a $7,000 cash deposit. And I'm like, I know we talked about this, but
Yep. Yep.
and so we have to pivot, and that makes for stress. But I think those things are that's part of the business. Those things are just going to happen because the agent communicated, I communicated, but it's how do we recover from that? How do we get us back onto the right path so we can get to closing? And that's a big piece of it, in my opinion, as well.
Definitely. Yeah. I would say there have been a couple of other red flags that I thankfully I uncover, but there's a lot of knowledge that, or I'd say, I don't know, knowledge isn't the right term, but information that floats around on TikTok and Instagram and social media nowadays that
ChatGPT.
ChatGPT, yes. ChatGPT is really cool. It's a fun tool, but it's not always right. And it is scary how wrong it can be, but sounds so confident in doing so. So you have to be very careful. Not everything you see online, and it sounds like a beaten drum, but not everything you see online is accurate to your situation or your local market. So you need to be very wary of that. If you have any questions, always bring those ideas to your team. There's no dumb questions. So if you see a piece of information that sounds cool on whatever social media platform, just bring it to us. And is it actually reality? And but I would say I could start to pick up on some things where they said, well, I saw this reel that I can house hack and I can arbitrage the numbers of the interest rates versus what I have invested. And it's like, no, just stop it. Not everything is actually good.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's true. There's a lot of stuff out there, and not of it. Some of it's great, but there's a lot that's not, or there's a lot that's just maybe either misheard, misunderstood, or just not accurate. So very important.
Yeah. It's okay if you see these things and you're curious about it, but it's not okay if you see these things and you take it as fact and want to act on it. I would say that's where you got to be really careful.
So. Yeah, definitely the fact checking. So what I would say is I would encourage home buyers to ask their agent and their lender, what does a peaceful transaction look like with you? What should this look like with you? And then that should be able to give a good answer. I mean, hopefully, you can get a straight answer, but to be honest with you, if you can kind of see it as a home buyer, if you can kind of see that there's maybe not some straight communication, you're not getting numbers, you're not, having open dialogue with your realtor, all those things up front, maybe it means they're not the right team. And maybe that's when you jump and figure out who could be the right team so you can avoid, potentially a disastrous or stressful situation.
Exactly. Yep. And make sure you vet your agents and your lenders very well. Ask them lots of questions. How long you've been doing this? And it's okay if an agent or lender doesn't do a massive amount of business. Yep. However, you want to make sure that they know what they're doing, because it's not everybody's goal to do a massive amount of business. But at the same time, make sure you get somebody that's been around the block a couple times and knows what's going on in today's market. Because it really can shift things. The documents that you have to sign, the new requirements, the hoops that you have to jump through that are completely different than a year ago. you don't want somebody who is necessarily just part-time in the industry either.
Yeah, and
And that
there's
is
a lot of those. Yeah, I
a
mean, there
lot
used
of
to be a
part-time.
lot more. Some of them have been, gotten just out of the business. But to your point,
Yeah,
you want somebody that's up to date on the things that are important to know.
exactly. Like the buyer broker agreements right now are 100% mandatory. You can't get around. Like those are mandatory. That's a U.S. wide rule. I started working with some buyers a couple of days ago. So they're like, we've never heard of it before, but we've been touring homes for how long?
What's happening?
And yeah, exactly. And so they end up jumping ship from that particular agent just because they weren't getting the support that they needed, and they weren't getting educated on the process. So they were just winging it.
Yeah,
If you're you said red flags earlier. If your agent doesn't send you properties, that's another red flag. If you're always sending your agent or your lender properties, that's a red flag.
yeah.
Um,
I mean,
yeah,
that's kind of the part of the role and responsibility of the agent is to do that. Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
So we've talked about affordability strategies, interest rate options, making sure they're reviewing really the important things to keep things not only during their transaction peaceful, but after the transaction and affordable. So there's no
Mhm.
big surprises. And what a good experience looks like. That's super important. Do you have any final advice for home buyers that you would just make sure to let these home buyers know what's something that you would say is your final advice?
It's going to deal with mindset. You are in a different situation than almost everybody you see on social media. You might be in a different situation than your friends and family. So don't compare yourself, because the comparison is the root of a lot of envy and a lot of disappointment or pride. So
Yeah,
just don't compare your exact situation to anybody else's, because you may not know exactly what you can or can't do with
yeah.
affordability.
Yeah,
So
and that's similar to the I get oh, but my coworker just got a house and his rate was 5.75% and he didn't put anything down. And I'm
yeah,
like, okay, well, to me that says he's a VA buyer, and VA loans have different interest. Yeah, there's just so many different things. I mean, when you look at what an interest rate is, there are like
yeah,
25 different things that can factor into it. So, like you said, don't compare yourself because no situation is the exact same.
yeah, yep. Go straight to the source. Get your team involved. Talk to your lender. Talk to your agent. Create a game plan. And you start with those and you get the right people involved. It is going to be a great process for you.
It's awesome. Yes. So definitely reach out to Charlie if you have additional questions around the home buying process. His information is below. And anytime you have questions around pre-approval or consultation, you could reach out to myself, and we can always guide you. But we hope you've gotten some great information around what a peaceful home buying process might look like. And we hope to help you someday or answer some questions. Thank you again, Charlie, so much for joining me. You've got a lot of experience and industry insight, and I love some of the perspective that you spoke to.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Kristen, for setting it up. And also, just if you're still hanging on here, the YouTube channel should be in the link below. We're going to have some other key insights on local neighborhoods, cities, communities, what's new. Please go ahead and follow that YouTube channel. It's called Beyond the Move Orlando. And follow Kristen's channel here on YouTube as well. We'd love to keep you up to date on what's happening. And then we have topics on there with big mistakes that we've seen made. I've got topics on advice too for particular things that we just broke down a whole tax bill today. So just go ahead and follow those channels there. You'll stay up to date and you'll have everything you need to know.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you.